What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Absolute Auction Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Miner. With me is my good buddy, Mark. Mark, what is going on? Welcome back on this Monday evening.
Yeah, not too much. We're getting into free agency here. We're about a little less than a month of no football, so starting to get the itch. Rookie season is kind of coming upon us as the combine comes up this weekend. So it's the NFL never stops, so it's always a good time to keep yourself locked in.
Yeah, that's right. We had that little break of from the Super Bowl, and now we got the combine coming in. But tonight we got a lot of fun, interesting players to go over. We're gonna do free agent preview, but from a dynasty fantasy football perspective. So we'll be talking about the players that are coming out in free agency from the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. See like what they get, what teams could possibly get them, and what people are like, what we've seen in auctions, what their value is. So we'll kick it off here first, Mark. We'll kick off with the quarterbacks, and as you and I were talking, before the show, the quarterbacks don't look that strong. Like the strongest quarterback as of right now, free agency wise, is Sam Darnold. And we know how teams can get quarterback needy with these quarterbacks and tend to overpay for what they got. But based on what you saw with Sam Darnold, like, how do you feel? Do you think he stays in Minnesota, or does he go somewhere else?
I have a really hard time reading the situation. I think basically what Minnesota is saying, they've said that he's basically earned the right to seek free agency, which basically, in my mind, says they're saying we're not willing to pay top dollar, right? But if you come back and you want to be the quarterback of this team, they do need some veteran presence, and if he can come back with a deal that that they feel is good, I wouldn't look past them maybe keeping Sam Darnold. I think they have JJ McCarthy, and you think that it's always just going to work out with the rookie, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will. And having some veteran presence there might be good after all, and just letting it be sort of a natural sequence because he really hasn't played any NFL football. And I think Sam is probably going to command enough of a market out there that he's going to see a decent sized contract. Maybe that 32 million ish number like we saw from Derek Carr a couple years ago might be something that we see for Sam Darnold. So it's hard to say. It's going to depend on where he lands, but I think his best bet is to stay in Minnesota. He'll have some continuity there. I think he knows the system, and I think honestly, if you discount the game, I know it's hard to get past the game itself, but it's also hard to find a really good quarterback in this league, especially when you're a team that's really trying to contend on a year in year out basis. So I could see him staying. I think that's his best option, but there's always the chance because again, like you said, it's very quarterback needy league. That someone is going to give him the bag.
Yeah, I mean, like he had 545 attempts, 361 completions. So one of his best statistical years, 66.2 completion percentage, 4,319 passing yards, which was good for fifth in the NFL, along with 35 passing touchdowns, which were also good for fifth in the NFL, and 12 touchdowns. You look at those stats, and he sounds like awesome. But I think what killed him, and what really killed him a lot, was that final game, regular season game against the Detroit Lions, where they lost 31-9. He was 18 of 41. Had a horrible game for just 166 yards. Couldn't get anything going. And then the wild card game didn't get any better for him. Another loss, 27-9 to the LA Rams. One touchdown, one interception. He was almost looking like vintage Sam Darnold of seeing ghosts. But like the reason I bring him up is like the team needies. Like there's teams out there who are needy, and you look at like one team that is definitely quarterback needy is the Vegas Raiders, because I mean they had Aiden O'Connell, they had Gardner Minshew this last season. I think Minshew signed a 2-year, $25 million team-friendly deal. I could see Darnold possibly going out there, or if possible, he does stay with the Minnesota Vikings. Like, what does it mean for J.J. McCarthy? He was the number 10 pick in the last year's draft. Is he the one that gets traded? Or do you think he just sits one more year behind Sam Darnold
I mean,
if that does happen?
it could. I think they obviously really like JJ McCarthy. They picked him in the top 10 last year, so I imagine that they do want to see the kid eventually. But again, do you want to just do you want to disrupt the timeline of when it's the right time? I mean, maybe it is the right time. I think that again, they don't have a better. They're going to need a better backup probably either way. So I think it's probably going to be likely that Sam would move on if they feel like they want to start McCarthy, because I don't think that they necessarily going to want to pay that much to what ends up being a backup. So yeah, I could see him maybe going to the Raiders. I really don't like to speculate too much on where they're actually going to end up. But as far as like a player goes, I think he's not somebody, if you're playing a one quarterback dynasty league, that you want to spend a lot of high capital on. He's going to be a good QB, 2, 3 that you can have in your depth. But in a super flex league, you're probably paying up to make sure he's your QB2. Just based on how he performed last year, he's still young enough. He's got some good years, and we've seen these revitalized careers from players that stick around the league and people still continue to have faith in, like Sam Darnold, like Geno Smith, like Baker Mayfield. All these guys, they can have a rejuvenated career, and it's not like it's the end of the road for Sam, because when it comes down to it, that team, despite the fact that they lost that last game in to Detroit, and that they lost that final game, the playoff game to the Rams, those were two teams that I think were clearly better than they were, had better quarterback play than they did, and ultimately had the Rams had a championship pedigree. Detroit has been the class of that division the whole year, and at the end of the day, they still won 14 games. That's the first time that's ever happened, that a 14 win team was a wild card. So you can't discount that. So I think he'd be a good player, but do I want to spend that much money on him in my budget when I'm thinking Superflex? I really don't know. It's harder for me to say. I really feel better kind of paying down and having a cheaper option if that ends up being my quarterback too.
Yeah, and then the funny thing, I'm looking over at some drafts here that I've got from sleeper people, and they have Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy basically going for like the same price range. Like I've seen Sam Darnold go as high as $18, as low as $13, and then same with JJ McCarthy, as high as $17, as low as $9. So the range is there between the two of them. Basically, it's a flip of a coin. I liked what Sam Darnold did, but I feel like he was more of that system QB in Minnesota, and I feel like this would be the time to buy JJ McCarthy. I really have JJ McCarthy at the same exact cost over Sam Darnold, knowing that I think McCarthy has higher upside than what Darnold can produce.
Yeah, I think for sure, if you're a team that's looking to sort of get younger, it's definitely a good move to make if they're going for the same kind of price, as far as like a trade is concerned, or really just that you're budgeting your dollars. But again, they're both quarterbacks there are in the range of guy who's probably an expensive QB2. And when I'm auctioning, usually if I'm looking for quarterbacks and receivers, we talked about it, the past couple shows, that I'm looking for quarterbacks or receivers in Dynasty, in auctions, and either I'm looking for two guys that I think are quarterback ones, or if I can only get one of those guys instead of two, then I have to peel back and look at people that are on the lower end of quarterback 2, or even like borderline quarterback 3, and try and get a few of those players to kind of hit for me. So it's hard for me to really want to click the button and put too much money on either of these guys. Even though McCarthy's young, you don't know if he can actually produce. Even though Sam produced here, You don't know if that's going to continue again. He's going to another system. It's the same question. It's the Baker Mayfield paradox from last year. He's going to a new place. He did it well, but he hasn't played so well, in years previous. So what are we going to see? There's a lot of uncertainty with both of them, and if you're paying up, I'd rather pay down for something else than pay up for either of them.
So speaking of paying down, let's look at two quarterbacks who are a little bit of the older end, and we're going to go with Aaron Rodgers, who's getting released from the New York Jets, and then also Kirk Cousins from the Atlanta Falcons, who's also looking to be released. So we know for a fact Aaron Rodgers will be released, and that's a huge cap hit, man. $49 million cap hit that the Jets will be taking on, and they're looking to push a lot of it to next season. So if they do everything post 6-1, they absorb $35 million hit. So that's massive for next season. But we've seen what happened with the Denver Broncos last year with releasing Russell Wilson, getting Bo Nix in the draft, and that team still actually made the playoffs. But, look at the same with the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins, another aging quarterback who's looking to be released. What do we say with those type of quarterbacks? Those guys are going for about $5 or less in auction drafts right now. Would you still be willing to take a chance on him as a QB3, or is that someone else's headache that you're willing to pass on?
I think you can probably get them for less. Yeah, if you can get them for closer to $1 or $2, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are going to think that Kirk Cousins on his last legs, and there's a possibility that he has a good year here. I think he's one of those guys that if you're stashing and hoarding quarterbacks on the back end, again, if you have a good quarterback one in a super flex, you want 2 or 3 good startable options if you can make that work for you on the back end. So he'd be a decent one of those guys to see if he has a bounce back. It seems like he had a shoulder injury from the middle of the season on. At least that's what he's been claiming. So maybe he's got a little more in the tank than we expect. I am less interested in Aaron Rodgers only because I think he is so far off at the age that I'm willing to just bet on a player like that. We saw Tom Brady do it, and he didn't. What did he play till 40? We said 42, right? So
yeah,
we're at age 41 for Aaron Rodgers, and he had some good looks last year, but I don't think he's playing still at the he's not playing that fast, and it's just he looks good, but he makes good plays. But I don't know if he got enough to bring him to a championship in any real spot. So I'm kind of out on Aaron Rodgers.
I'm with you on Aaron Rodgers. I'm also out, and I was out on him ever since the end of his 2022 season, where that was his final season with the Green Bay Packers. Because you look at his stats from that year and his stats from this year, they're almost mirrored. He threw for a couple hundred more yards, 2 more touchdowns, 1 less interception. It's no big deal. To me, I'm with you on this one, Mark. He's done. I'd rather have Kirk Cousins at $1 or $2, just because of the possibilities of coming back from his Achilles, and he's only 37 years old compared to Rodgers 41. I think he definitely showed some progress as the season went on, but then as Michael Penix came in and took over, we knew that was kind of the writing on the wall for him. But if he goes to someone, say, like Cleveland, who needs a quarterback, but like I said, we're not going to speculate, but that'd be one place I would like to see him go because I think that'd be a perfect scenario for him. But who really knows how this is all going to pan out until we know?
Yeah. I think ultimately, you think back a year ago and you're looking at these 2 quarterbacks again coming off of really, really gruesome Achilles injuries, both of them, right? And going into this year, I think everyone was really just kind of wondering what we'd expect from either one of them. And I think at the beginning of the year, I felt like Kirk kind of shook that Achilles, the Achilles was going to hamper him. I think he had some pretty decent games in the first half of the season. And then again, he seems again to say about having this shoulder injury. I'm kind of, if that's kind of where he dropped off. If he can just get the shoulder right, I think I'd be more worried about the Achilles than the shoulder. And again, the 4 years, on Rodgers, that's kind of where I am. I just can't
Yeah.
I can't really get behind this, especially because we're talking dynasty here. Like we can't get into the weeds too far about these $1 old guys that are probably they've got maybe a few games this next season, but not that much.
Yeah. And then speaking of two quarterbacks too, you got one that has the fountain of youth still, and the other one who's kind of on the back nine. We have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields looking at him. And you look at how Russell Wilson did. He looked pretty good in his first two starts of the season. Winning those first two with the Steelers, and then he lost 5 of his next 7. He looked like bad Russell Wilson. He looked like the reason why the Denver Broncos let him go. And then you look at Justin Fields, younger, 26 years old, could get a nice team-friendly deal, especially as a bridge quarterback, because this quarterback class is something to kind of worry about, especially with the Steelers picking so late in the first round. It's kind of hard for them to get a good quarterback. But, Fields has that rushing presence. I feel that would definitely compad his numbers and would be a very, very nice addition to stay with the Steelers. And I would actually let Russell Wilson go. And then as fans are looking at it, as drafters are looking at it, they're also kind of feeling the same too. Like they're buying more of the Justin Fields still. He's about $6-7, where Russell Wilson is about $1 or $2 cheaper. So nothing too different, but it looks like people have more faith in Fields than Wilson. How do you feel about that?
These are one quarterback drafts.
Super flex.
Super flex drafts. Yeah. I mean, I think $6-7 is not too bad for Justin Fields. I also think both of these are kind of utility quarterbacks. They both kind of showed this past season that they're both kind of utility quarterbacks, and Russell's the kind of guy who might get the nod. And I'm sure Justin Fields will have an indeterminate number of good games this season. So yeah, if you can get him for cheap, I think that's not a bad look at all. The $200 budget, if they're like, I wouldn't want them as my QB2, but again, they're probably in that low end $5 bin of players that I want to take a few stabs on if I need to platoon my second quarterback in a super flex league.
Yeah, and then a couple other quarterbacks that we just touch base on. Daniel Jones is available. He's an unrestricted free agent out of Minnesota. I forgot him being there behind Sam Darnold. Jameis Winston, another free agent, 31 years old, coming out of Cleveland. Mac Jones out of Jacksonville, still a free agent. And how can we forget the old Trey Lance? The number 3 overall pick from the San Francisco 49ers is a free agent here.
Yeah, I think for the most part, all these guys, there's some small potential world where they're getting starts this year. Like Jameis, I think maybe more so than Daniel Jones, but he's only been off the starting spot for a few games on the back end of the season here. And we're quarterback needy. Some teams might want to take a ride on rehabilitating Daniel Jones, and maybe that makes him again another one of these utility quarterbacks that you can use over the season. It's hard to put a lot of dollars on these guys because you really don't know how many games you're going to play. Jameis Winston is going to get hired and fired from any job that he's going to be given here, and hired again because they got to go back to him. So it's hard to tell exactly what's happening, but yeah, if you can get really cheap dollars on them in dynasty leagues, I really think you probably have to extend your bench. What's the budget on those dynasty leagues you're doing? $200?
Yeah, they're all 200.
So if there's still 200, you still need to deepen your bench, and I imagine there's somewhere above 20 draft startup picks that they have to go for. So like if you're auctioning, you need to save some of these one. Like I would kind of think of those guys as $1 players, because you really can't invest much more than that in them and kind of hope that they're gonna pay off for you, unless they really hit it big and have a starting job that they get for the whole year or a majority of the year, which that's just like not likely to happen with most of them, except for maybe Russell, maybe Justin Fields if he gets the right fit and he earns the job. I think he's got a chance. If Daniel Jones earns a chance where he's going to be, but again, like you're never going to know. So it's hard to put that much more capital into them until you can. We're talking about the same thing with Sam Darnold, just at a higher price point. We're at the point where he was last year, where you're willing to take a shot. That can't be more than $1 or $2 if you really believe in him, until they have some equity.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, we're going to move on over to the running back position now. And looking at that, it's actually a little bit better, but maybe by a player or two. Kicking it off, I like this. I like Najee Harris a lot, but we got Najee Harris, we have Aaron Jones, and J.K. Dobbins, who are really the main tall tales of this running back tree. Out of those three, who do you like the best so far?
Um, Aaron Jones, I think, just has probably the most upside in most of, in a PPR, half PPR league. Just still, he showed that he had it last year. And for a lot of these older running backs, the pass catching kind of, I think, helps extend their career a little bit, makes them into a little more of a receiver, even though they are taking, hits as a running back, and he's still running tough. He's one who always gets hurt, though. Najee, he's a tough runner. He's probably going to get a job. He's not as efficient. He's on the older side of his careers as well.
He's 26, and he's just not efficient, man. He just gets a lot. He gets a ton of carries.
Right. He's not a Saquon, and he's not somebody that I'm really going to expect to have a renaissance year in his 27th, 28th year. So for me, all these guys are still year to year. So that's fine. You're probably going to get them at a discount because of that in Dynasty, which is great. A lot of these guys are going, well past the 6th round into the 8th, 9th, 10th round, some of them. And that's in drafts, not in auctions. But I still think that for the most part, they're going to go for you for cheap. And that I really don't like paying for running backs. So they're going to be, I imagine I'm going to get a few of these guys on my Dynasty rosters when I'm
Yeah, and you're exactly right. These guys are going for under $10 each. So, you can get J.K. Dobbins for around 6. I've seen Najee go as high as 11. And Aaron Jones is kind of a fluctuation around 12 at the highest point I've seen him go for. So it all depends on where they go, to be honest.
If six for J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah.
I kind of like that, honestly. I don't mind taking a stab on him again. I thought he ran pretty well. You're worried about him getting hurt. You were worried about him getting hurt, but he's still running okay.
He ran good, but he wore down fast. That's what killed him.
He did wear down fast, but again, maybe not. Maybe $6 is a little too much. It's still early. It's still early in the Dynasty season. We got a lot of rookies coming on. But I mean, I feel like he's going to be somebody that after the rookies kind of get integrated into everything, he's going to be a dollar player and that you can get pretty easily. And he's still going to have useful weeks for you.
Yeah, but I mean, if I can get Aaron Jones for, I see a draft here, $5, that's a heck of a deal right there. I'd take Aaron Jones for $5 there.
Absolutely.
If you get, he doesn't look like a 30, I think he's 30 years old if I'm correct. Yeah, he's 30 years old. So he's the oldest running back out of this free agent class right now. And J.K. Dobbins, Najee Harris, and also Jalen Warren. So both Pittsburgh running backs, just like the quarterbacks, are also free agents. And those guys are all 26 years old. So I like Dobbins. I mean, those ACL tears killed his stock a lot, but last season he definitely rebounded from the Chargers. So I like you said, I like him too. But if I just have to spend one more dollar on Aaron Jones, I'm willing to spend the dollar more to get Aaron Jones on my roster.
Yeah. Honestly, these guys are all going to be, especially because they're going so late and for so much cheaper, they're going to be very room dependent. Like who has the money in the room, and when that's the case, you're going to have to kind of pick and choose your battles with who you actually end up getting. Because it's going to kind of come down to who has the money and who are their preferences. And then, and if when you're the one who has the upper hand in a bidding war kind of near the end, I don't want to call it a bidding war, but just, a little sparring at the end, you got to know when you're willing to bid up on those guys and when you're not. So I think they're good guys that are not gonna hurt your budget too much. And running back, you have to be replacing them a lot anyway and turning them over on your roster. So I don't mind age at a running back, as much as the rest of the dynasty community necessarily does. And that's not because I don't want the young running backs. I just think the difference between the young running backs and just the really good older running backs, like, even though it didn't bear out for years, I felt like, there's no reason to keep moving Saquon back in the order just because we have these new guys coming in. And so, he still should be a top running back as long because he's a freak of nature, right?
Right.
I feel like we got to that point where we were calling everybody generational, even though there was only a few that were generational. You might see, like Saquon has always been like a generational talent. And then I think we've gotten to the point where everyone got sick of generational talents and calling people generational talents, that Saquon just said, like, yeah, I'm that generational talent, by the way. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't care that much about the age, because I think, as long as I think they have a good year or two left in them, I'm willing to invest. I'm just usually not willing to spend up is the thing. So it's not that, it's a different reason why I'm not paying. It's not because I don't like their age. It's because I don't like the price point of a running back, because anything can happen. They can get hurt, and, this can happen for a lot of players, but it just happens to running backs a lot more often, it feels like, because they're taking such a beating.
And a lot of these drafts must be listening to you a lot, Mark, because a lot of these running backs we're talking about right now, they're like single dollar type players. Like they're all under $10, and they're easy to get. I mean, you got Jalen Warren $6. You've got Nick Chubb $3, Javonte Williams $4, Rico Dowdle, another running back out of Dallas, $3. So these type of running backs are dirt cheap, and just like you and me, we're willing to buy these guys for this cheap, not knowing where they're going to end up, because at the end of the day, turning and burning that roster with the running backs.
And they're always going to be part of a committee, likely, and, you have to play the game of, are they, this player's a little older, this player's a little younger, but who's getting the majority of the backfield share and the pass catching share and all that. It all kind of, you have your ideas of how it's going to shake out, but it doesn't always come out that way. So I think you gotta, unless again they're like those high end players that are getting, the Bijan Robinsons, your Saquon Barkley's that are getting 80+% of the rush share, and just like the backfield share of their backfield, because there's always just going to be a rotation. It's hard to just say, okay, I'm going to pick this guy over this guy, and I'm going to spend this much more. You have to be willing to accept that, like, sometimes, the other guy, even though it doesn't make as much sense, maybe they score more touchdowns that year, maybe they're more active in the run game, or the other player gets hurt, that if you spend too much money on those guys right below that top tier, it ends up that, you've just wasted money on a bunch of running back depth that you can't really use.
And my feeling is too, like when the actual free agency starts, that Najee Harris could be the highest paid running back out of this class coming out. Now it's not, and no one's gonna be paid like they were last season. I see, maybe a 2 to 3 year contract, maybe 12, 13 million total guaranteed at best. Try to get someone there, but they ain't gonna be as high as they were last year. This running back class kind of sucks. Not gonna lie.
Honestly, it's not that great of a free agent class in general, at least not for fantasy football. A lot of guys that are going to be really good for your football team, not so much for your fantasy team.
Exactly. And some people don't seem to understand that. They're like, well, if they're good for football, how come they're not be good for fantasy? Well, I don't get points for blocking. And sometimes a lot of these players are very good blockers, so they can tend to be out there on passing down. They're not pass catchers, but they're out there to block.
Right. You don't get extra fantasy points for all the hard yards Najee fights for, which is like his signature thing. It's a great part of his game, makes him a great football player. Not gonna help you in fantasy.
The coulda woulda points.
Yeah.
Any other running backs you want to touch on here, Mark, or we're good to move on?
No, I think we've got the major guys out of the way. I don't again, it's all situation dependent when you get down to the bottom of these. So and again, a lot of them in Dynasty are going to be $1.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. But like the best part of this free agent class is looking at the wide receivers. And the best one to start off with right now is T. Higgins. Like it's the rumor is that Cincinnati is going to franchise him, but they're looking to sign him to a long-term contract. They're also looking to sign Jamar Chase and Trey Henderson at the same time. That'd be amazing if they could somehow figure out how to do that. It's got to be Joe Burrow taking some sort of pay cut in order to make that work, in my mind. But for T. Higgins to be available as a free agent, that just seems nuts. 10 touchdowns last season, out of 73 receptions, 911 total yards. It was his best year. And if he gets franchise tag, I think it's another $26 million alone there. Do you think he actually stays, or do you think he goes?
It seems like they're really trying to get him to stay. I think Joe Burrow is being very vocal about him wanting him to stay, and maybe that means he'll take some kind of pay cut or just maneuver some money around that to allow the cap to kind of work. You can guarantee Joe Burrow's contract for the year and get a little, and put it into a signing bonus and maybe get a little back on the cap for that. So it's definitely possible. They're obviously going to be, if they do they're putting the franchise on him, then there are going to be people looking for trade. It's going to be what everybody talks about all offseason long until the signing actually happens. I tend to think that he's going to stay, and I think that's probably the best thing for his game. You could argue that you could send him to, New England, who's got a lot of money, or you could send him to the Chargers, or you can send him to a number of different spots. But I think him being beside Jamar Chase is something special. I think him being the number one in New England doesn't necessarily make his situation better than it would be in Cincinnati. So, I mean, it's money talks. So
Absolutely.
whatever he ends up getting, the best contract is where he's going to go. But I do think probably the best option for him is just staying home, to be honest. And I think he wants to stay.
He does want to stay, and I agree with you 100% of this value. Like, this is where his value is at. Like, he is a solid wide receiver 2 for fantasy as long as he stays in Cincinnati. If you try to put him as the alpha somewhere else, does he stay that, or does he drop down in, as more of a wide receiver 3/flex, but depending on exact landing spot? You say New England, you got Drake May, but our defense is going to close on to him. He doesn't have a Jamar Chase at this point on the other side of him. It's like, the Detroit Lions, how they have, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, or Minnesota with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. If you have a nice dynamic duo, it works out well. So this dynamic duo needs to stay together somehow, and his value doesn't get any better than this. I'm doing a quick look here to see what his value is, and it's about $14 to $18 range also as a wide receiver, so not a bad deal. 18 being the highest I've seen, compared to Jamar Chase, who's at 33. So you're going to pay up for a player like him, but to have T. Higgins, who it's not, that much of a step back from Jamar Chase, I like that value quite a bit for half the price.
Well, I think this is a combo that you can easily see both of them being in the top 15 in the right years. It's not going to happen every year. But, it's kind of like that Diggs and Thielen combo for a couple years there. Although it's felt like two ships passing in a night, you think of like Evans and Godwin being ones together. I feel like having Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together, definitely, with Joe Burrow throwing the ball, throwing 3+ touchdowns every single game, it's hard not to see that and say that's a good option for him. I think he's just gonna feel, again, he's not gonna have to worry about chemistry issues or Again, he still gets a pretty high volume of targets as long as he's staying healthy and on the field. He could get decent a decent quarterback in Drake May, go to another decent quarterback in Justin Herbert, and it kind of all ends up closer. Either again, I don't see a better option, and unless they pay that much more in cap, and I think for the most part they're trying. It seems to have the money to keep him. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back on this one and see exactly where he lands. If he does stay, we don't have to worry about talking about it. But if he goes somewhere else, that would definitely be a great topic of discussion.
yeah, and that $18 price is not bad either. I do like that, and he's just one of those guys. I think he's got a nice nose for the end zone. So he's if you can get him at $18 and he has one of those big touchdown years, it just that's kind of what you're looking for to help buoy your team above the rest.
Oh yeah. Speaking of moving above the rest, how about Chris Godwin? The rumor was, they were going to look into franchise tagging him, but they end up like doing something with this contract where they're allowed to like kick it down the line, and they're working on more on a long-term deal. Godwin's coming in, 28 years old. Was it torn ACL? I want to say it was something that
Yeah.
it was late in a game that it was a meaningless game. They ended up getting hurt in. He had a good game during that time, but getting hurt. He comes back. You got Baker Mayfield. You got Mike Evans on the other side. K. Dotton for $6-7. Are you back into buying Chris Godwin? Because I sure am.
For $6-7, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a really good price. I wonder if you could get. Honestly, I'm thinking about going to trade in all my dynasty leagues for Chris Godwin now. Although I have him in a lot of them. But yeah, I feel like for $6-7, he's 27, 28. Is that
28?
28.
Yeah.
He's 28, and honestly, I feel like he's always been a good player. I think coming back to the Bucks, he'll probably be that number 2 receiver, and move out of the way. K. Dot and move out of the way. Jalen McMillan. Godwin, I think, is going to come right back in. I don't think that he necessarily loses himself in the pecking order when he goes there. It's all going to depend on his health. We're going to want some good camp news, but I think, again, coming off the injury, he's probably just a little devalued right now. And for $6-7, you're willing to take the bet. You get good news, you could trade him. That even if you don't really believe in him, I think just the price is just right here.
Yeah, like he was dominant. When he only played the first 7 weeks. He got injured in the week 7 game against Baltimore. But I mean, he was basically putting up double-digit fantasy points in 5 of his 7 games.
And really,
he would have even had better.
And the Bucks were like a top 5 offense this year. I mean, it's like it's hard to argue that if Godwin comes back and he's injected into this offense, that it's not a good thing for him. He could easily give you wide receiver 2 value.
Yeah. And even like with losing like Liam Cohen, which was the offensive coordinator for the Bucks, they still promoted within. So they got passing coordinator Josh Gizzard, who was hugely like right behind Liam Cohen. So I see this offense like picking up right where it left off at. It's not going to be a downtrend of trying to change the whole offense. This is going to be the same type of offense, and it should still be very powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
Another wide receiver, an ageless wonder, and I actually have his jersey over here. Of course, that was back when he played for the Chargers, but that's Keenan Allen. He's actually a free agent out of the Chicago Bears. So Chicago traded for him, try to get Caleb Williams a weapon. It panned out pretty well for Caleb Williams, or actually Keenan Allen. But Keenan Allen definitely took that step back of usually seeing his 150 plus targets. He saw 121 targets, 70 receptions, 744 yards, 7 touchdowns. A high touchdown rate for him, which is basically average because his highest of his career is actually 8. So to be there, 7 touchdowns again. It was another good season for I like to call him the ageless wonder because he doesn't seem to be aging. He just seems like be that consistent guy here at 32 years old, which is crazy to me. I think he's still playing at such a high level.
Yeah, I mean he's a good vet, and honestly, I feel like we're kind of spoiled right now with a lot of these vets in their 30s that are still balling out. I mean, Devonte Adams balling out, and yeah, I mean Keenan Allen at the end of the year, I had drafted him and I almost kind of fell out because he was the hard part was sticking with him while he was kind of hurt there in the middle of the year, and then he ended up being a league winner by the end in the fantasy playoffs. So he's still doing good work. It's hard to want to invest a lot of money in your dynasty capital towards him, but again, he can be value for you. He can be a nice flex play, and you're probably getting him dirt cheap. What's he going for in those drafts, Ryan?
I have him right now at $4.
$4.
So $4
I
range.
would hope that it'd be a little bit less. I mean, like maybe after again we go through the next cycle of rookie fever and all that extra stuff. He might go down a little bit, I think, but $4. It could be better, but again, he's if he's scoring touchdowns for you and he's on the right place, like I think hey, maybe he goes back to LA and
LA.
just finishes his career. Although I can't say I think that'd be really that great for his fantasy value. He's probably one of those guys that's better. He's gonna have a nice year, but he's not something I'm gonna want to necessarily have in fantasy if he's still going for that $4 or $5 range.
Yeah, he's actually it's like I've seen 3, 4, 4, 2. So he's down there basically almost down to he's under $5. So
Yeah.
that's a good deal. I can't pass up on that. Especially if we get one more year out of him.
It's gonna depend where he goes and like what the depth chart above it. But I do think that he'll probably get on the field. He's not going to just be sitting there if he's playing next year.
No.
But I could also I still think there's a possibility he might retire though. But
Speaking of sitting there, this one wide receiver who I actually thought was actually going to benefit being traded, and it did absolutely nothing for him, except for maybe, I think, one game. And that was Amari Cooper going to the Buffalo Bills. Like, he had one game where he had over 95 yards. That was it. And like, he didn't do anything. Like, he had a double-digit fantasy game when he got traded to Buffalo, and then pretty much out of sight, out of mind. And to this day, I don't know why they ended up trading for him.
I had Amari Cooper on a team on like my contract league team, and I had Josh Allen. So the trade happens. I'm like, oh yes, this
You were
is
celebrating, weren't you?
This is gonna put my team over the top. Yeah, Amari did me so dirty on that one. But he's a good player. I don't know if they just ever really. I don't know what happened. I guess he was just more injured than they had let on. But even still, I feel like he never got involved in the offense up beyond that one snow game where he pitched it back to Allen. That was like his one moment there, and it just didn't make sense that they never really kind of integrated him into the offense. They just kind of had him sitting on the side. But I guess it was just a comfort thing. It's probably just a comfort thing with Josh Allen in general that if I can't trust you, I can't go to you. I kind of want to see, like, if they run it back, I'd be really interested to see how that looks, because ultimately I think that's just kind of like a double down on the idea that, like, we do want to get you involved. But it's hard, right? These guys over 30, you don't want to spend too much money on them, too much capital on them. Third round pick. I don't know if I want to spend a third round pick on Amari Cooper right now. Even though he might provide some games, he's always kind of been, a little inconsistent, and if it's only going to get worse in his 30+ year seasons, then it's hard for me to be in on him.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, hard to be on him because, like, he was even like that same way when he was in Cleveland. It's like, all right, he was hit and miss. There'd be games like,
when he was in Oakland
he'd explode.
and when he was in Dallas, any of the stops, he was he's been good, but he's been inconsistent. He's had monster games, but he's been inconsistent.
Yeah, and you bench him in those monster games, and then you put him in the next week for your lineup, and then he does nothing.
Right. I feel like there. He's in the mold of like where later career Julio Jones had a lot of these where he'd have really big games and then he just wouldn't do anything for a long time. And I feel like that's just like been Cooper's career the whole way.
Sorry.
No worries.
All right, and then we'll move on to
Family business.
Yeah, that was my son asking me a question real quick. Moving on, we got Stephon Diggs, man, 10-year veteran, uphill battle trying to convince teams that he's still effective at age 31, coming off a torn ACL. Is that going to be possible? I mean, for what we saw when he went to Houston, he looked like that upside play, but when he went down with the ACL injury, it definitely hurts him. And being at the age 31 here, I feel more willing to let someone else take him, just because I feel like that recovery is going to be a lot harder at 31 as a wide receiver, where I started getting that nervous feeling of 32, 33, and then the 34 like downfall of wide receivers. That scares me right there.
And I have to go back and watch his tape again. But it definitely felt to me like he lost a step a little bit in before he had the ACL injury. He's fine. I think he's one of those guys that might have like wide receiver 2 upside in the right situation, but it's just really tough to bet on it, and again, tough to put your dynasty capital into it.
Yeah, and people, let me look real quick. They're kind of putting a little bit of capital into it, not much, $4, $3 ish. So they're still optimistic that all right, I'll spend a little bit more on them if something does happen. I got a trade piece, but I'm not going to go above and beyond and spend more than that on them.
Right, and again, he's also just at that age where if he's on your roster, you're holding the bag. There's nothing you can really do. After a certain point, people aren't going to be as willing to give you trade capital for them. But he still does have he has the upside. It's just these wide receivers make me like anxious a little bit. Just going through every one of these older guys, because they all kind of feel the same to me. Like, honestly, I feel like you just got to go with whoever the cheapest one is in your draft at the time. I think it's probably going to be Keenan Allen most often, but
yeah,
like still, I think Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, if they go for cheaper than you'd expect, they're the one that goes for $1. They seem like players that you want to throw out for $1, and if somebody says 2, you say,
see ya.
You can have them and I don't want them at 3. So like, and if somebody spends 4, great, right? That's kind of how it feels like, at least from a dynasty perspective.
Yeah, and like he's already he burnt through 2 stops. He's in Minnesota, then went to Buffalo, Houston. I think he's actually going to have to sign like more of a team-friendly deal as a prove it in order to get something. And for me, I think his best bet would be just stay in Houston, just because he already has that chemistry started a little bit with Stroud and company, and plus with no Tank Dell, more than likely not going to be playing this next season. That'd be the biggest benefit for Diggs to stay.
Right. I did see that there's like a very low. I forget what the report was, that there's a very low likelihood of him returning, but I think he wants to get his money. He's a receiver. He's only got so much time left. You got to make hay while the sun is shining, and really, he wants that money, so he's gonna look out for it. I don't think it would be unlikely that he might come back to Houston in the end and take a smaller deal if everyone's giving him small deals, but that's tough. Same thing, Cooper Kupp's another one. Cooper Kupp is also going to be out there, trade conversations. Ultimately, he's going to get cut. I just, they're saying, yes, go out and seek a trade. We give you our permission. But that also means, like, we don't think anyone's going to be willing to give you the contract you want. So,
no.
And we're not going to pay it either, so we're going to cut you. And I think they're just being nice about it, and it's just like a really nice way. Like, it's saving face for Cooper Kupp because he's a very respectable player. He's been great for the organization, won a Super Bowl with them. They don't want to do Cooper Cup dirty by saying we're just going to outright cut you. They're saying, here, please seek a trade. And so eventually I feel like he's going to get cut, and he's going to, be probably looking to be, a helpful piece for a team, but again, probably not fantasy relevant piece.
No, and I hope he does become fantasy relevant because I still like Cooper Cup and I have him on my fantasy teams. He helped me win a championship a couple of years ago, but just like you said, I think that ship is sailed, and it's Puka Nakua's wide receiver room going forward. Moving on, we're going to look at Hollywood Brown. We thought the possibility of him actually becoming something good in Kansas City would have been great. He gets injured in that very first game. It wasn't even the very first game. It was in the preseason. He got injured. So, he goes from over 100 targets from his career from Baltimore, Arizona to 15 targets in 2 games for the Kansas City Chiefs. And what we thought would actually be something didn't turn out to be anything really for him. More of like a wide receiver 4, I feel like, if you look at him in the draft. So, like, if you're going to be drafting him or trying to keep him on your roster, he's going to be another one of those $2 to $3 players. It's the end of the draft type bids. I'd like to see him possibly come back to the Chiefs as another, like, try to prove it deal. Be like, that injury kind of slowed him down. Comes back there for a team-friendly deal. But I think he's more of it could possibly be an NFL player than a fantasy football player for us. Mark, do you feel the same way, or am I on my own island on this?
No, I kind of agree. Wow. Sorry.
Dude, I was excited about Hollywood Brown when he first signed there. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be great.
Yeah.
Gets Patrick Mahomes someone to throw to. This is Rasheed Rice there, Xavier Worthy now. It's like, man, this team's gonna freaking cook, and I got cooked instead.
I'd be interested to see if he does sign back, like you said. Honestly, I think that he's probably a good depth piece to have. Nice bye week fill in for you for a couple teams. I think he's a player that is going to get injured a few times during the year. It's just always kind of seems to happen to him. Shoulder injury, whatever. I don't know if it's because he plays hard or if he just if he doesn't take care of his body or what, but it just seems to happen to him more than most. But when he's on the field, I think he's got that upside. He's still got the speed. He still was helpful for them in their Super Bowl run, even though they didn't win. And really, I think he's not a guy that you want to have to rely on like he's been in the past. Obviously last year not so much, or even. But in years previous, before he went through a round of trading from team to team, from Baltimore to Arizona to wherever. It's just he's now at the point where I think he's cheap enough that it makes sense for you to be in on him a little bit and just use him as a depth piece because he can really provide some nice upside.
Yeah, absolutely, and like he's going for cheap. About $2, $3 I keep seeing here. Definitely a nice depth piece to have. Like I said, wide receiver 4 I'd be comfortable with if he stays there with the Chiefs. But yeah, depth piece that more than likely will probably be a trade piece sometime down the season if he does end up exploding.
Right. He's a perfect case for that. Like he gets a hot start. You trade him immediately.
Yeah.
like you know what I mean? Like he comes into the season healthy. And he's playing pretty well, and he goes off for you. See if you can get some good value for him on that before he either gets hurt or he turns back into a pumpkin for a couple weeks. Because again, he's pretty boom busty too. It's just just kind of in his nature.
Speaking of boom busty, or turning into a pumpkin actually too. How about his teammate DeAndre Hopkins? Like, do we still have the faith in him to keep playing at this high rate, or is it time to move on? I'm moving on.
I'm moving on. That Super Bowl drop was really brutal, and that's not why I'm moving on from DeAndre Hopkins. That's not what I mean. But it's just kind of like it's felt like the closing of the cover of the back of the book on what has been just kind of like a slow decline for DeAndre Hopkins. Where even, at the beginning of this year, you felt like you had some faith. You you saw him not really do much while in Tennessee. Obviously, Will Levis, you can try and excuse that. He goes to Kansas City, never really gets, involved in the way that you think that he would, and where, the way that you think the cachet of a trade like for DeAndre Hopkins for a championship contender like the Chiefs, you never really get that sort of level of involvement that you're looking for. And just, he had a, that just that rough catch, did end up catching a touchdown. But it's, again, it kind of feels like probably a nice time to say goodbye. I don't know if he's going to get a better shot at a Super Bowl than that. And, he's had a great career. If I'm starting up, there's no way that I want to click the button on DeAndre Hopkins.
No,
If,
and that's how it's going too. It's like someone's either bidding on him, they're throwing his name out there, and then they get him because they want him, or you're hoping that, hey, I know this guy will take him, so he's going for $2. Boom, done. Like, he's a quick one. That's basically just a bench fiddler now, where I wouldn't even nominate him if I was doing an auction startup right now.
No, I'd be nervous to nominate him because I wouldn't want to get him for $1.
Yeah, that $1, that's where you get the roster clogging from. It's like, I could spend $1. Yeah, it's $1, but you could have put it on someone else that's actually meaningful as a position.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't get cute with honestly, like, any of these older players that you're like kind of out on, and it's really just, it's going to be your preference. It's going to be how you are for Dynasty, because everyone's Dynasty theory is a little bit different. But if you're out on players, don't get cute at the by nominating them at the end of the draft. Really, just let the players who want them go for them, or as long as you're better off just not being on your roster than you waste bidding up a player for that.
Right. And the same can be said for players like Mike Williams and Deontay Johnson, which are the last two I'm going to touch on, unless you have anyone else you want to look at. But those two guys, I'm also willing to let someone else have them. I don't want them, but they're going for $1 or $2 also. So if Mike Williams, if Mike Williams would have stayed at 81, he might have had a better chance there in Pittsburgh. Instead he had to go to 18 and start dropping everything.
I've heard there might be a Chargers reunion from Mike Williams as well. I actually kind of like that thought better. I don't know if that's actually fantasy relevant. I'm sure they're gonna, try and pursue other players. I know they're probably thinking of pursuing T. Higgins, but Mike Williams wouldn't be the worst fit going back to LA, and just being a nice veteran presence for the team. So again, not fantasy relevant, but football relevant.
Yes, football. Yeah, he'd be more of a locker room presence, someone to do something. I mean, last time he was at the Chargers, I'm gonna throw 2023 away because that was a season where he was injured. But 2022, he had 63 receptions, 895 yards, 4 touchdowns. If he does somewhere near half of that, 3/4 of that, we'll say 650 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's just some flex at best, or a bye week replacement at best if that's what you get out of him.
Right. And again, when you're looking at Dynasty, it's hard to, when you have those guys that are like borderline flexes, it's hard to break the tie in favor of the older player if they're kind of like over the hill. They're not going to give you a ton of fantasy value. You're probably better off even just like looking for to scoop up some youth there.
Yeah, and then RIP Deontay Johnson shares if you have any anywhere, because I don't think he's going to be signing anywhere at this rate.
Yeah, it's hard to make any thought that he could get some money. I can't see him like fully being out of the league, but like, man, it's damning when you are like traded multiple times over in a season and cut and
traded 3 times.
Yeah, well, I thought, wasn't he cut and then went to Houston, or was he? No, he wasn't traded to Houston, right?
No, he wasn't traded to Houston.
He was traded. He was
to
cut
Baltimore.
Cut by the Steelers. Went to the Panthers, right?
He was traded to the Panthers. Then he was either released or
Oh
traded
yeah, he was
to the Baltimore Ravens.
traded to the Panthers from the Steelers, traded to the Ravens, and then cut by the Ravens, and then signed by the Texans. So that's a pretty rough year for Deontay Johnson. I imagine he's probably going to be doing as much as he can to save face from that and find a job. But I imagine he wants to get the ball more, and if people aren't looking to pay him like he's a number one, it's kind of hard to want to have that in your locker room. So we're gonna see. Sounds like a Jets signing to me if I've ever heard of one. So yeah, I don't know. I'd have a hard time putting my money on that.
Well, speaking of a hard time, we're gonna move on to tight ends here, and looking at that, it is not very good looking. If you want a tight end, these free agent tight ends are. I'll just run down with them real quick. These are all $1 players I've been seeing: Mike Gesicki, Juwan Johnson, Gerald Everett, Zach Ertz, and Hayden Hurst. Those are dollar tight ends. Nothing big, nothing there. I need a tight end. Throw a dart.
And there's a whole list of dollar tight ends that are like way above these dollars.
Yeah. No, there's plenty of tight ends out there that are like, I'd rather have also. Like, it's not like anything that's, oh my God, yeah. It's like, I could probably go down to, let me take a look here real quick. Yeah, like I would take Theo Johnson over these guys. Ben Sinnott, these are second-year tight ends coming out. Jatavian Sanders still. Cole Kmet. These guys are higher than these guys. Isaiah Likely. Jonnu Smith. Give me those guys. I'll spend a couple dollars on those compared to the guys of Mike Gesicki and all of them.
Gesicki I can maybe see, especially if like T. Higgins does go somewhere. Because I don't know if they're gonna. I doubt that if T. Higgins goes somewhere, they'll probably just sign like a vet. A guy that could be. I don't imagine them spending a high draft capital pick on a receiver at the very least, the Bengals. So I could see them maybe like trying to be in the Cooper Kupp market or being in, one of those vet wide receiver markets. But then maybe that's a place where Gesicki can maybe get a little bit more of a target share. So if he stays in Cincinnati, I could see it. Eric all being injured, and if they lose T. Higgins, maybe there's a path for him to being the number 2 pass catcher. I guess not necessarily with Chase Brown, but like being that second non-running back pass catcher in that offense. But again, still not willing to spend more than $1 for that.
No.
So.
Nope. I'm the same way with you. Well, that was a good episode, man. I mean, we got through all 4 positions. The tight end one was the easiest one to get through.
Who thought we could talk for so long about such a bad free agent class?
Well, because we got to make content on it somehow. So we threw out the players, we threw out dollar values that they're going for to kind of give you guys a better aspect of it to see should you bid on them in your draft or not. So that's why we're doing this. Well, yeah, that'll do it for tonight. Any last words for you? Anyone? Jeez, oh, Pete. Any last words, Mark? Any last words, Mark? Holy crap!
No, I've been adding a few more salary cap dynasty leagues to my my portfolio. I've been adding a few more salary cap dynasty leagues over the past couple weeks, and things are starting to move. Like I have a franchise tag deadline that I have to meet tonight. And I've been really enjoying some of that. So maybe we get into some more salary cap league stuff here going forward too.
Heck yeah, we'll definitely talk about that because I'm sure that people would love to hear that. What I'm working on is I'm taking a look at all these drafts I've been getting from people, kind of seeing what the values are out there in players I like at their current costs, and I'm gonna try to make some videos on those too. So be on the lookout for that.
I love it.
All right, man. Well, this is the Absolute Auction Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.